My name is Guillermo Moreno, and I am the FIP coordinator for OPAGAC. Um, so, let's see. Opa. This computer is rather touchy. Okay, hopefully that's it. Okay, here we go. So, as Javier previously mentioned, he explained what OPAGAC is. I will not go into it. But what is a FIP? Moreno briefly explained it, so I'm going to go a little bit more in detail. The first thing that the project did was, the fisheries did, was go into a pre-assessment to determine what the shortcomings of the fishery were. They were identified by consultants, and once they were identified, we went through a scoping process, which is to determine what needs to be done, how it is going to be done, when it is going to be done, and who is going to do it. So this is a plan that is being put together by an independent consultant who will then present it in July in Rome to an advisory group. This advisory group is made up of members from environmental NGOs, industry, science, governments, and international organizations like FAO. The idea is for them not to rubber stamp the plan, but actually to critically assess it and to come up with ideas on how to develop each of these steps and what are the more realistic ways of doing it. And then, of course, we go to implementation, where we are going to actually apply those activities and actions according to the timeline proposed by the advisory group. So what is the aim of the FIP? The basic aim of the FIP is to achieve certification with Marine Stewardship Council, MSC, in 5-year time. For this, we have to address the 3 principles that MSC has identified. Principle 1, sustainable fish stocks. 2, least environmental impact. And 3, effective management. Ultimately, the goal, however, is to produce a blueprint of standards for sustainable purse-seine fisheries worldwide. How do we know when it's improvement? When the fisheries went through the 13 units of assessment, which are each combination of a species, ocean, went through the pre-assessment, they got scored against the MSC standard, and tables were produced for each principle, principle 1, 2, and 3. I'm just going to show you principle 1 so you have an idea of the complexity of the issues. This is the 13 units of assessment by ocean and species, red indicating where the assessment failed, yellow where it passes conditionally, meaning that it has to increase, and green where it passes. This is actually not the assessment done by the consultants, but this was the assessment done by WWF, which is far more stringent than the one done by the consultants. So we're actually starting from a much lower point than we would otherwise. So principles 1 and 3 are really addressed at the RFMO level. So these are things that really scape the capacity of OPAGAC to drive change. Obviously, consultations and influences through the EU and so on help to implement some of the things such as harvest strategies and so on. But really the place where OPAGAC has the capacity to make some changes is in principle 2, which addresses least environmental impacts. And this has to do with the bycatch of sensitive species, as well as the effect of FADs on the ecosystem. FADs are fish aggregating devices, and I will mention them a little bit later. So the first thing we need to do is define how purse-seiners detect fish. They may be as free-swimming schools, i.e. there is fish associated to each other. Schools associated to dolphins, but the OPAGAC fleet does not fish this way. This is mainly in the Eastern Pacific. And schools associated to floating objects. Floating objects may be marine debris, a dead whale, a whale shark, a trunk, or a man-made FAD. So what are FADs? FADs are basically platforms with hanging elements that drift through the water and where fish congregate. What are the problems with FADs? Well, FADs have a variety of problems. In this photo is very telling, where animals become entangled, particularly sharks. So there has been a big drive in the fleet to actually develop non-entangling FADs or nets. And you can see that the design is different, and the whole idea is that animals do not become entangled, therefore reducing the impact of this tool considerably. So there are various issues relating to drift fads that need to be addressed, and this project aims to address them. The first one is, do fads entangle marine animals? Yes, they do, but this can be resolved with the use of non-entangling fads. The second one is, are the materials used to make DFADs and nets polluting? At this time they are, because artificial materials are being used to build these structures. However, there is a big push to replace these materials with natural biodegradable materials such as bamboo, sisal, hemp, and other types of material to avoid polluting. This is probably one of the more contentious or more difficult issues. Do purse seiners catch juvenile tuna? Yes, they do. However, for the fleet, it's not economically feasible to catch these small fish, so they are trying to reduce this catch, and it is a very tricky question. So one of the tools that they're trying to use is discriminating buoys, which give information on the species composition, size composition, so skippers can make an informed decision on whether to set or not to set in a school, and what their bycatch or the catch of small tuna would be. And here we come to really the two questions that I think are crucial to the question of fads. Are there too many DFADs, NEFs in tropical oceans? And the answer is probably, as they result from fleet overcapacity. What is overcapacity? Too many vessels fishing for the resource. And the ultimate question, can DFAD, NEF effort be managed sustainably? And I think the answer is yes, together with vessel capacity for all fleets. We need to really address all fleets when we're talking about capacity, because even though purse seine catches a considerable amount of tuna, it's not the only fleet fishing. So why use NEFs? These are non-entangling fads. The first one is food security, because it increases the catch rate in the biggest tuna fishery in the world, catches 67 to 69% of the world catch. Efficiency, it improves economic viability and fuel efficiency of fishing vessels. Domestic development, small locally based vessels that supply tuna canneries are dependent on DFADs, and Maldives is a perfect example of this with their pole and line fishery. Distribution of effort and license revenue to some EHS where fishing on non-FAD schools is inefficient. Fishing on free schools or non-FAD schools can be quite tough. So you have to spend quite a bit of time chasing fish, and also you have to catch bait, which is a weak point of pole and line. And reduction of mortality of some stocks. Free schools are typically made of a higher proportion of yellowfin, so when you propose to eliminate false altogether, the question is going to be what's going to happen to those free schools that have got large amounts of yellowfin tuna. And we are seeing some indications that the shift in effort in the Indian Ocean from school-associated, FAD-associated schools to free schools may have resulted in the overfishing of yellowfin. So where is the fleet and where does it need to arrive? At the very left we have got the least environmentally friendly fads, and at the very right the most environmentally friendly fads. So right now we are on the third stage of non-entangling fads, and through the development and research of biodegradable materials, we hope to be actually having the whole fleet replacing their fads by 2018, or hopefully sooner if possible. So why is this FIP different? Up until now, all fisheries, purse seine fisheries that have certified fish have only done it for free schools. However, they're still fishing on associated schools. So we feel that there is a big gap there in which issues with fads are not being addressed because part of the catch is already certified. So we want to address that issue. The first thing is that the definition of what constitutes an associated school is vague. And none of the RFMOs has a clear description. Some people propose that any school associated to a FAD has to be within a mile. Some other people say 5 miles. So in reality, a lot of fish that are being caught right now are being labeled free schools, when in reality they are FAD schools, FAD-associated schools. And the other point is that MSC certified vessels still fish with FADs, but these fish are not included in the certification. And more importantly, the issues with FADs and nets are not being addressed. And we feel that this is an important tool for the purse seine fleet and that we need to manage it. In addition, there is a code of good practices for sharks, for mantas, for turtles. The bycatch of turtles in the purse seine fleet is minimal, and there are a few studies that have looked at this issue. It is true that in terms of sharks, the capture is much larger. However, we need to put it in the context of what the other fleets are doing. If we look at purse seine at the very top of both graphs, we see that the capture of sharks in the Atlantic Ocean is minuscule compared to just about any other gear, except long line, pole and line at the bottom with the BB bait boat. So we can see that the major catch comes from long line, which together amount to about 100 plus times what the purse seine fleet catches. This is not to say that the purse seine fleet shouldn't reduce its bycatch of sharks. It's just that if we're talking from a conservation or management perspective, we have to see who is the biggest party in the capture of these animals. So why is this FIP unique? Usually the FIPs are very localized, but this one encompasses all oceans where tropical tuna are caught. So you can see from left to right, you can see the Western Central Pacific, Eastern Pacific, Atlantic, and Indian Ocean. The other thing is that this FIP aims to address all issues and methodologies of the fishery. We're not trying to cherry pick those issues that are going to look good and are going to pass on an MSC certification. The reality is that fleets are still using fats, so let's resolve that issue. And finally, that we hope to present a blueprint of standards for sustainable purse seine fisheries worldwide, because we think that the way for the industry to go is really to become sustainable in all aspects of the fishery. Thank you.